Thank you for coming. Today's final session is called Pinning for Success, presented by Sarah Baughman, the Evaluation and Research Leader for E-Extension, and Amy Hayes, a Program Specialist for Texas AgriLife Extension.
Good. Okay, we know this is the end of the day, and you are probably waiting. You've waited all day long for this particular webinar. So we're going to go ahead and go through it, and remember it's recorded, so if you have a question, we're going to repeat it back to the audience. So, all right, how many of you are on Pinterest? Wow. How many of you are on Pinterest and like being on Pinterest? How many of you are on Pinterest for your job? Okay, less people. So our job today is to show you a little bit about how Pinterest, you can use it successfully in cooperative extension model, and then also the evaluation part. How do you evaluate what you're doing? And to figure out, are you getting the reach that you want for the tool that you chose? So we're going to be breaking this up a little bit into Pinterest and the evaluation part. So this is just to show you what you probably already know. If you haven't heard about Pinterest, you have been under a rock for the last year. In terms of its use, it is obviously not as used as some of the other social medias, but what you should know is it's one of the fastest adopted social medias that there is. Its age group also is pretty specific. The age group is mostly younger and women and also different ethnicities. So if you have a target audience that's different, you might want to look into this tool and see, is this where my target audience is? This infographic just shows you basically what the percentage is, or visually what these different tools are doing. And so you can see 70 million users, most of them are female. And of course, this is what you think of and what you hear about Pinterest is about what I'm going to plan my wedding, how I'm going to build my house, how I'm going to cook the recipe that will fail. Those are all on Pinterest. But what we want to tell you is that I think there's a huge opportunity for cooperative extension to be on Pinterest and use this tool not because of the people that are on there, but the people that could be on there. So we're going to go a little bit just about over that part. I'm not going to tell you much about it except that some of the constraints. You can have one account on Pinterest. You can choose to have it as your personal account. If you're going to choose to have it as your corporate account, you need to be aware that if you're a .edu, you can only have it for the parent account. So it has to be the parent URL. So if you're going to do that, you could go a corporate way, you can go a personal way. You can set it up with Gmail or Twitter. You can link it to your Facebook. So there's different ways to kind of get around that, but be aware that it can become a management issue. You can have up to 350 boards, and each board can have 100,000 pins. So pretty limitless. This is typically the layout. If you want to think of a user account, you have several different boards up to, you remember the 350. And in this case, this is one that we've set up that demonstrates how it could be used in programming. These boards are all set up to the way that we talk to our client. So this would be an example of how a specialist or an agent might use this, setting up in the topic areas of how they serve people, okay? Some of these are group boards. These are boards that you can pin with other people. So there's some potential in that. We're not really going to go over that part of it today. We have a webinar on that that's in Learn. We just want to show you that right now, people are not using this in cooperative extension quite this way, but they could be. So if you want to organize your pins or your board in terms of the client that you serve, that might change the way you look at Pinterest. Within the boards, there are pins. And each pin has the ability to have, let me go to the next slide, quite a bit that goes along with it. Each pin has an image. That's the big thing about Pinterest, right? It's a visual representation of information. It has where it's found. So for those of you who are interested in branding and recognition, you can immediately see that on Pinterest. The nice part about Pinterest, though, is it gives you a lot of room to write a message. So you can craft an educational message that goes along with this pin. This pin does go to a website. So ideally, people who click on this pin go directly to the article or the information that you want to. But I would not leave out your educational message, although this one does, in this area where you can craft an educational message, because the idea is that, yes, people would go off-site, but at the same time, if you have an opportunity to educate them right there, right then, you want to put that critical information on here. It also has possible related pins. This is a little bit of a smart engine in Pinterest, so it's going to try to give the user some related pins. The more you pin that possibly are related from your agency or organization, the higher likelihood that related pins are going to show up to users. So those of you who have very rich pin boards, where you're pinning more pins about that topic area, using the same things that you do across the web, using keywords and vernacular that's the same across all your different social medias, the higher likelihood that they will be recognized in these internal search engines for different social media. That's the same across most social medias. It also shows you all other pins from the original poster. So the better you are at posting, the more pins other people will see of your other pins. So sometimes people set up pin boards and they only put 1 or 2 pins on there. That's not serving your purpose well. If you're going to set up a pin board, you might as well populate it with as many resources as you can in order to get the full benefit of what your user is going to see once they access a pin. And then also, this is kind of a nice part in this area where it shows you from what other pins are from that resource area. For those of you who have agency, organization, if your information is being pinned in Pinterest, the larger that will be. So you want to make sure that your content that's on your websites is pinnable. One way to check that is for your web pages. Any web page that you have, try to link it and pin it in Pinterest. If it comes up with an error, no image found, that piece of content is not pinnable. That probably means it's not shareable very well in other social medias either. So you want to remember that when you're looking at your own pages, because Pinterest is about user experience and also the visible linking to other related data or information. So how do you boost your Pinterest potential? Is it about just pinning? It's not. There's some tricks of the trade that you want to try to do if you're getting people to cooperatively use your pin boards or to use them to deliver educational messages. All right, so here's where Sarah's going to talk about what different types of methods you can use to evaluate and then how to expand your pin use beyond just pinning.
So those of you all have heard me talk anytime in the last 48 hours. These are not new words for you. Reach and engagement and conversions, they're kind of what I always talk about with the social media piece. But Pinterest is a little bit different in the sense that there's a couple different things that you can be looking at from an evaluation standpoint, or really from a measurement standpoint. So the first is your own particular Pinterest account. So to kind of think of what's happening on your own Pinterest account. The second piece is from the status of your web page. What's happening with Pinterest from your web page? So I will address that at the end a little bit, but first I'm going to talk a little bit about your own Pinterest account. So reach and engagement, reach is touches, so things that relate in Pinterest would be people liking your pins, following you, they can follow your board, they can follow all your boards. And then engagement would be looking at things like comments and repins, and in just a few minutes here we'll talk more about how to do that. And then this is the piece I love about Pinterest as opposed to a lot of the other social media. I mean, typically the idea with Pinterest, with your educational pieces, is also driving people to more resources that are located on your, most likely on your web pages, okay? So a lot of times that's the ultimate goal, and that is something we can actually measure. We can measure if Pinterest is driving people to your web pages. And in fact, Pinterest, of all the different social media sites, drives more people to web pages than any other social media, more than Twitter, Facebook, any of them. So that's a nice advantage. Okay, so this is Amy's Pinterest board. So you can see, it gives you the number of boards. This is right here on her page. How many pins she has total, and then it tells her the number of followers. Some other simple statistics you can get on Pinterest. So this is related to the pin. So this particular board has 77 followers, but if you look at the actual pin, you can see here, it's got 11 repins and 7 likes on a single pin. Okay, I'm going to let Amy talk a little bit about boosting Pinterest.
So the best thing you can do is to craft and create good pins. That's your job as a curator or a pinner. So there's a couple of different things to do. Some things that are problematic that we see that either create bad evaluation or bad statistics in the end. First thing is make sure that the pin, when you pin the pin, it goes directly to the article. A lot of times people say, well, I need to boost people who go to my parent page, my top page, my agency top page. That's okay on the agency top page count side, but it's really not a good practice in Pinterest because it frustrates your users. It may turn them off to you completely. So think about that. Make sure when you click, if you are repinning, that you go ahead and click through. Make sure that particular pin goes to the correct article. That's one way you can do good practices. Why? Because that has a likelihood, if you do that well, people are more likely to repin it because they're going to do the same thing, and to like or love it. Those are all good practices. Images on your page are important. If you want to know how, then Sarah just said this is the one thing that leads people more traffic. Make sure the images on your pages are pinnable. They don't need to be in the meta, the header, or the footer. They need to be actual pins of images on your page. And use the alt tag. The alt tag actually helps put the content into the image. Now, if you're in an agency, we talked about this last year, if an agency and organization, you need to do that for readability anyway, for accessibility for handicapped users. You need to use it also now because that's the data that Pinterest pulls to populate the page. So if you craft good alt messages, which is what you do when you create your web pages, that are rich and full of content, the more likelihood that Pinterest is going to pull that in for any pinner. That's a really good thing for you to do. Add the rich text descriptions because about 80% of the people who repin things do not change the description that came with the original pin, which means that your message can travel along each time it's repinned. Okay, the user has the option to do that, to change the text that goes along, benefits of mulching, moisture retention. They have the choice to do it, but 80% don't. Next, advertise your new pins on other social sites. Tell people what boards exist and say, hey, I just pinned 10 more articles of information on water conservation. Go check them out. Give them a link to your board. So you want to continuously encourage people to visit your boards also through all your social networks. The one thing also that is a new feature in Pinterest that's kind of interesting is the mapping capability of creating a pin that relates to a location. Now, if you take this one step farther, you know that a lot of our natural resource information and natural resource pins are regionally relevant. So you can add a location that this particular pin would be relevant in and add it in the description. You can also do this if you're pinning in certain locations of local. For this conference, we pinned local restaurants with a location to the pin. So people were able to do that and find pins in the mapping sense. So there are some of your resources that you'll be pinning that are locally relevant. So go ahead and take a look at that feature.
So like anything else we're doing, you need to be clear about what you're doing with your Pinterest board, and I will warn you, it's really easy to start pinning educational pieces on your Pinterest board, and 2 hours later you're still there. So you really, narrow in on what it is you're trying to do. Set those expectations. Are you trying to boost followers? Are you trying to drive people to a website, your parent site, your county page? Think about, be really specific and have good strategies for what it is your expectations are. All right, so we're going to dig a little bit deeper now down into Pinterest and talk about some of the metrics that you can get. So we showed you the metrics that you can get off your own Pinterest board. There are some, like other social media sites, there's some third-party analytics that are out there. More than other sites, I've gotten a little bit frustrated with trying to find good Pinterest metrics because you'll find a third-party site and it's great and you love it and you sign up and it's free and a week later it's disappeared. It's been bought up or repackaged or is now going to cost you some money. So a couple things. Sites that I wanted to show you. I've been playing around with Tailwind, and I'm going to show you some screen sites. It was called PinReach and then I found it repurposed as Tailwind. They do have a free option, and so I'll show you some of the things you can get from that. Pinalytics is still around. It has a fee, and then I have not played with this one, but I did find it when I was preparing for this. Scythe. Is there anybody out here who's played with Scythe? Okay. So just another one you can check out. So here's a screenshot from my personal Pinterest page. So that's why the boards are a little funky. And this is from Tailwind. So in the beginning, Amy was talking a little bit about how you set up your Pinterest account. And I've sort of given up trying to keep my personal life separate from my professional life because it's just not happening. So I would have done this maybe a little bit differently. But when I first started on Pinterest, you could only have personal pages. Yeah. Sorry, I'm walking around too much. I'll stand right here. So my Pinterest has boards related to cooperative extension, related to evaluation, related to my own personal interests, related to my family business. So it's a little wacky. But go back one. So just so you can see what you can get off of Tailwind, the one thing that's really nice is it's an easy way to see repins. They give you a virality score, you know, how things are spreading out, and then also an engagement score. Now we can move on ahead. And then I'll also give you, this is for, you can pull up for each specific board. So I clicked on one of the boards and it tells how many followers that board has and what it's been doing. I haven't been that active on Pinterest lately, so it's not horribly impressive. Now, I also talked a little bit about how you set up your page. If you have sort of an official page that you're using and that you can track to a parent URL, so you probably can't do it for your county page, but if you're doing it off a parent URL, like say for your whole cooperative extension system, then you can validate your website and you can use, Pinterest has its own built-in analytics, but they only work with the parent URL. But if you can do that, you can get some good metrics out of Pinterest. It'll tell you pinners, repins, which is a nice engagement, reach, and then these are the ones that really start getting good, and we'll talk about how you can also do this in analytics. How many times users clicked on your website if they're clicking through those pins to get to where you're hoping that they're going to get for maybe some more educational information. So we'll talk about those Google Analytics in just a minute here. Here we go, look at that. So if you're in Google Analytics, you want to go look at referrals and put Pinterest in the search box. And then it'll come up here and you can start playing around with looking at more about how Pinterest is sending people to your site. Wow, we talk fast. Time for questions, and we're going to switch around mics here for just a second.
And like I said, this did not go over the logistics of setting up a Pinterest account and the strategy. We have a webinar on Learn that's done on Pinterest that tells you more specifically, here's how you set your strategy, these are the things to think of.
I had a question about the personal versus the work accounts. We have some people in our office that are trying to use it to be able to contribute to our program's Pinterest site. But to do that right now, do they have to literally log out of their phones and then log back in, or can you have two accounts on one phone? How does that work?
You cannot, but what we've done is found a little bit of a way around that. So you have a personal account, and then you have maybe what we call the corporate account. It's not the actual corporate account, but your county account. What you want to do is create potentially some shared boards. The shared boards would show up on everybody's personal account. So 5 or 6 of us could be contributing to a board. And that would be the board that you had set up from your county account. So the county account sets up the boards, and then it invites the personal people to pin with together as a group board. That way, on each of our little personal accounts, we see the group board, we see the county board, but the county board does not necessarily have to see all our personal boards. So we set up group boards for collaborative pinning. Okay, it's the end of the day, so we will cut it off there, but if you have any questions about Pinterest, come ask us or any of the network literacy group.